Well, welcome back, everybody, to the introduction to Unity Basics. For some of you that are taking this course, this is for your membership and to becoming a member of Unity Spiritual Community of Grand Rapids. For other people, you're just taking it because, hey, you thought you'd like to learn a little bit more about Unity. And so regardless of why you're taking the classes, I just want to welcome you back again. So class is going to be, as soon as I can get the computer to work, there we go. Unity principles and beliefs. So last time in the first class, we went through the history of Unity, like the history of Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, the history of New Thought, what happened, and we went through all that good stuff. But we really didn't do a deep dive into what are the beliefs and what are the principles behind everything that Myrtle and Charles were able to do. And that's what this class is all about. So I welcome you to sit back, to relax as we cover a few of the things that make Unity very special and very unique to Unity. So welcome. So we're going to start off with this concept of spiritual maturity. And I think it's important that we talk about that. What is it and why does it matter? The reason I bring up spiritual maturity is to talk about this idea or this concept. Like spiritual maturity is just like physical maturity. So think about it. When there's a baby, the baby has a baby body. And then as the baby continues to get older, the baby grows. And then what happens is the baby gets bigger and then the baby's body gets bigger. And then all of a sudden the baby goes from adolescence into puberty and then you become an adult. Well, there's no difference with the physical body than it is with your spiritual maturity. And what I mean by that is if you're fairly new and you're coming into this stuff, then think about it as being a spiritual baby. And you're just starting to learn, you're just starting to be exposed to these new concepts. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't make you right, wrong, good, bad, or better than, or anything. It just means that spiritual maturity really is a thing. And what'll happen is the more that you come into this work, the more you get exposed to it, what it means is that you're going to grow and you're going to expand. And where you are today might be a little bit different than where you are 5 years from now. And that is completely normal and completely acceptable. And so just be aware of that you could have two people in the program that are looking at a particular concept, or they're looking at something and they're studying it. And somebody could have been exposed to it for the very first time. And they may be thinking, well, I'm not so sure. And then you could have other people that will look at this concept and go, oh, no, I totally get it, right? And so there's a different level of maturity. That's all. And just to be aware of it. It doesn't, again, make anybody better than anybody. But there are things that happen when you study this material where you're going to understand stuff at a deeper level that you may have understood 2 weeks ago, 2 months ago, 2 years ago. And you might look at it and go, oh, well, that's landing a little bit different for me now than it was back then. That's completely normal. And so really the reason I bring it up is just from the standpoint of it's okay for you to have a different opinion. In fact, one of the famous quotes from Charles Fillmore was, I reserve the right to change my mind at any time. I love that quote. That's one of my favorite Charles Fillmore quotes. So that's spiritual maturity. I just wanted to bring it up. The next thing I wanted to talk about is a concept. This is actually a psychological term, and it's what's referred to as the adjacent possible. So let me kind of explain it to you this way with the adjacent possible. Here is, if you will, in this box is your current belief system. Okay, so this is what you currently believe. And then what happens is as you get exposed to different understandings, different teachers, people normally react one of two ways. They normally say, maybe, which is where the adjacent possible is. Or they might come in and say, no, there is no possibility for this whatsoever. And that's why we call this the adjacent possible, because in the adjacent possible is where you just leave the door open. You just let the information come in, you notice it, you go, okay, that's interesting. We'll see where it goes. It's like planting seeds, and you just kind of let the seeds just take root, and it's okay. Because here's what's going to happen. As you go through this material, as you go through really, and you start studying metaphysics, there could be things that you come across where you're 100% like, yes, I totally get this. It makes total sense to me. Yes. And then you might come across something where it's like, I don't know. Or you might come into something where it's like, no, I just can't do it. And just know that that's normal. This is a psychological term. One of the stories I like to talk about when it comes to the adjacent possible. And by the way, as I share the story, I just want it to be made very, very clear that there's no expectations on my behalf for you to believe anything I'm about to explain. If you do, great. If you don't, that's okay too. So in other words, I'm not expecting anybody to necessarily believe the story I'm about to tell you and the way it impacted me. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. It's perfectly fine. So I wanted to talk about my story about Edgar Cayce and reincarnation. And so, as many of you know by now, I came from a fundamental background. I was a fundamental Christian. And as a result, when it came to anything, especially having to do with reincarnation, of course, fundamental Christians don't believe in reincarnation because it's not in the Bible. So it was a big, does not exist, right? And so that's the way I believed when I was a fundamental Christian. But as I started to getting exposed to other studies, reincarnation started popping up, and I still was like, it was kind of like on the periphery. It's like, yeah, it's kind of there, but I don't necessarily believe it. It doesn't make sense to me. I'm still having some fundamental values that I'm leaning on, but it's definitely there, and I'm just trying to process it. Well, what happened was I was exposed to, for many of you may know, Edgar Cayce, excuse me. They called him the sleeping prophet. Why did they call him the sleepy prophet? Well, Edgar Cayce would go into a trance-like state, and this was back in the 1920s. And he would go into these trance-like states, and people would come from all over the world, and I'm not kidding when I say that, and they would come to him with problems, medical conditions. And Edgar Cayce would tell them to do things that were really just I mean, it's just some of the stuff that they said was just crazy. It's like, hey, I want you to go in your garage and I want you to go to the third shelf and there's going to be a jar of nails. Grab one of those nails. And then what I would want you to do is I want you to go to the grocery store. And when you go in the grocery store, on the fourth aisle on the left-hand side, there's going to be a jar of honey. I want you to get that jar of honey and I want you to bring it back home. And then what I want you to do is I want you to stick the nail in the honey and suck on that for 20 minutes. I mean, I'm making this up clearly, but it was just like bizarre. But here's the crazy thing is that people were healed. And I don't just mean one or two, I'm talking hundreds and thousands of people were healed by the work that Cayce did, which is fascinating in and of itself. There's actually something called the Association of Research and Enlightenment, and they recorded all of these readings he did because he had a secretary, and she would write down what it was that he was telling these people to do. And so you've got all these readings that were recorded and are in Virginia Beach in the Association of Research and Enlightenment. But here's the kicker, and why am I bringing this up when it came to reincarnation? Well, here's the thing. After almost every one of the readings towards the end, Cayce would be told and be given information that this person and the problem that they're having was really the result of something that happened in a previous lifetime. In fact, most of his readings did. So they would say something, for example, oh, the reason he's having this issue, it was because 3 lifetimes ago, he fell on his bike and was really upset about it and it never resolved itself. That's why his hip is bothering him now. And Cayce would come out of these readings, of course. Oh, let me also say this, by the way. Cayce was a fundamental Christian. He read the Bible every single year of his life, every year of his life once he got to be of a certain age, and taught the Bible. He had a huge Bible study most of his entire life. He read the Bible and he taught Bible study. When he started doing these readings, what happened is he would come out of these readings, people would start doing what they told them to do, and they would get better. But at the end of every one of these readings, they would say there was something that was caused in a past life, almost every single time. So Cayce was really struggling with this idea of reincarnation because he's a fundamental Christian, and he is going like, hey, wait a minute, like what's going on here? Why do they keep bringing this up? And as I was reading this, and I thought to myself, number one, Cayce is healing thousands of people that are getting healed by this crazy stuff they're telling him to do. Why would they come up with this thing? And so this is where reincarnation went from my not adjacent, from my not adjacent and not possible to my adjacent possible. And then from there, I just kind of let it sit on that. And then I started studying some more information about how reincarnation was originally in the Bible, and then it was taken out of the Bible by Justinian. And all of a sudden, it went from being adjacent possible to becoming part of my belief system now. Again, I'm not expecting anybody out there to go change your belief system because of what Mike says. I'm just giving that as an example of what happened with me in terms of this concept of adjacent possible in your belief system. There's a good example of it. So why am I sharing this? Again, because as you go through and you start to learn these new things that we're going to be teaching you in these classes, and as you attend Unity, you're going to find times when you're going to be in the not adjacent, not possible, and that's normal and that's fine. And you will not be judged by that in any way, shape, or form. But then sometimes things are going to land and it's going to be like, you know what, that kind of makes sense. Like, I'm going to let it sit there for a little bit. And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, it becomes a part of your belief system. So I hope that was helpful. So let's move on to the next slide and talk about what is unity. And I love this answer to this, and that is unity is not easy to define. There is no one definition of unity. It's many different things to many different people. No one person's definition is better than the other. I really, really love that, because here's what I know. If you were to line up 20 unity ministers and ask them, what is unity? You're going to get a different answer from all 20 of them, because unity is not easy to define. So if you were to ask Mike, what does Mike think unity is? I always say this, to me, unity is really about developing a spiritual practice that will help you change your life and change your belief system, that will allow you to do things that you couldn't previously do and experience things that you couldn't previously experience. That's my best definition of it. Of course, again, you're going to get a lot of different definitions. And so what I want to do is I'm just going to go through some different thoughts that some of the famous people in unity have talked about when they answered that question, what is unity? So from Eric Butterworth, who is obviously I've mentioned this in the first one, but I'll just say it again. He was a very prolific writer in the unity movement, was around in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and 80s. And he was just very prolific. In his book, Unity, A Quest for Truth, which is a great book if you're wanting to go a little bit deeper, and it's just a great beginning book. He says it's important to recognize that to define a thing is to limit it. You do not become a mathematician by memorizing all the answers in the back of the book, nor do you become spiritual by memorizing a lot of definitions or building a vocabulary of metaphysical terminology. And what he's getting to in that is that experience is everything. Experience trumps all of it. So what we want to do in unity is we want to have the experience of what it's like to stand in our divinity and in our full power. He also says unity is not a creed to accept or an abundance of definitions to memorize. Unity essentially is a technique through which you can find answers for yourself in words that are meaningful to you. I love that. That's a beautiful definition of unity to me as well. He goes on to say, we live in a universe of law. Unity is not a theology, but a study of spiritual law, the same spiritual law that enabled Jesus to do the great works attributed to him. So unity does believe that when Jesus said, this and far greater things you will do, that he was serious. He wasn't kidding around. And we believe we have the ability to basically study those spiritual laws, apply those laws to our life, and make some great changes in our life. So he goes on to say, among the fundamentals of Jesus's teaching is one idea so dynamic in its implications it should be shouted from the housetops, and that is, the kingdom of God is within you. So within you is the unborn possibility of limitless experience, and yours is the privilege of giving birth to it. So these are the discoveries. These are the thoughts. This is what makes unity so different. The kingdom of God is within you. So do you mean that then, God is not in some faraway place where he's this old man up in the sky and he's, sitting there pointing his finger down at you. No, unity does not believe that in any way, shape, or form. We really do believe that all the answers that you could ever want are within you. He goes on to say, unity is probably the most difficult religious discipline in the world simply because you are face to face with God and with yourself. There is nowhere to go. There's no one to blame. There is nothing to hide behind. I love this quote because I always compare it to, so many of you know that I'm a runner and I run marathons. And the thing that I love about a marathon is you can't hide. It's not a 5K where you go out there and sprint and then you're done and you're all over with. You're going to be out there a long time and you're exposed. And I think the same thing with unity, because when you really get to the root of unity, you take full responsibility for what's showing up in your life, and you believe that your thoughts create your reality. And when you do that, then all of a sudden, you're no longer a victim, and you can't blame anything or anybody. And when that starts to happen, when that thought starts to seep into your mind, then it's like, uh-oh, if I'm not a victim, and I'm going to stand in my power, and I'm going to say everything in my life and in my world that I am somehow creating it on certain levels. And I'm not going to say we always know why, because there's times, honestly, when we don't. But what I'm saying in general, we do believe that our thoughts create a reality. Then all of a sudden, you're the one that is going to be looking within you to find out, what could be causing this showing up in my life? What are the thoughts, or what are the patterns, or what is it that I got to believe in order for this stuff to be showing up on a regular basis? So then you realize that your life experience is the result of you keeping of the law, that God can do no more for you than God can do through you, with the responsibility upon you for the disciplining of your thinking. And certainly we talked last week with Myrtle, and we're going to talk about it again today, the story of Myrtle, how she was brought up believing that her body was frail, that she was sickly, that she could do nothing about what happened. She could do nothing other than be at whatever whim her body was going to put her through. And then all of a sudden she realized, oh my God, I've been telling my body the whole time this. And then all of a sudden she started changing her thoughts. And as a result, she was healed, right? And so that's why the quote, the disciplining your thinking. That's why Butterworth is making that comment at the time. We might say that unity is daring to do what Jesus did in his day, to proclaim the practical aspect of spiritual principle, the livability of Christian teaching, the eminence of God and God power. In other words, unity is seeking only to put the teaching of Jesus in the present tense. Salvation now, heaven now, God and the healing power now, present in you now. Everything in this moment, in the present moment, is happening right now. And that's one of the things that we really do believe, is that all of the teachings in the Bible, one of the mistakes that people can make is thinking, well, that happened, for him 2,000 years ago, but unfortunately it can't happen for me that way. And that unity doesn't believe that at all. Unity believes that if you use spiritual principles and practice these tools that unity teaches, that you too can have and make dramatic shifts in your life regarding your health, regarding your relationships, regarding all kinds of things wherever you apply these spiritual principles and tools. Unity is not a church in the usual sense. It asks not what your background, your religious affiliation, your station in life. It asks, what is your interest, your aspiration, your vision of life? In other words, we are saying, what do you want to go create in this incredible gift that's called your life? What do you want that to look like? And realize that there's something that you can do about it other than just think it's a pipe dream and it'll never happen. But there needs to be work done. There needs to be work done. We will think about God, about Jesus Christ in the Bible. However, we will not consider them as facets of a religion that can be professed separate from life and living, but as keys to our own self-discovery. In every case, the emphasis will be on you. And I would say on you and your thinking, on you and your connection with the divine within you, on you and your connection with God. So you are going to be about the equation in so many different ways when it comes to what unity teaches. Okay? Well, the Christian idea has been centered around the concept of the worship of God, which usually means bowing before an altar, a statue, or a church official. Unity is concerned more with finding a consciousness of oneness with God, and then seeking to express that oneness in thought, word, and act. So again, it's this idea of us talking about this idea of this consciousness that we have where we're one with God. And therefore, we start to do things to develop what that is, to have a deep understanding and a deep relationship with God, and then seeking to express that in whatever way that we feel we want to create our lives, so that we can start to do things by using the tools, by using our actions, by using our thoughts, by using our words to create the reality that we're wanting to create. Unity is an open door to self-discovery for those who are curious, who want to know more of the meaning of the word around and within them. I love that. We are constantly making ourselves what we are. Unity reveals that our lives and affairs are completely influenced and shaped by the character of our thinking. I'm just going to repeat that again. That is shaped by the character of our thinking. That a person is not limited by God's will or environment or by fate or circumstance, but by his own dominant or her own dominant state of mind. What is your state of mind? Is it more positive? Is it more optimistic? Is it more about abundance and healing and forgiveness? Or is it more about doubt? Is it more about lack? Is it more about uncertainty? Is it more about fear? What is your dominant state of mind? And what Unity believes that you can do is you have an influence, you have a say in whatever your state of mind is. Unity is not simply a church to join or a creed to espouse. Unity is a study of religion as science of living. It is an interpretation of the teachings of Jesus Christ with prime emphasis on practice. So yes, we really are going to practice the tools that we believe Jesus used and taught when he was alive. Essentially, unity is a technique in realizing an abundant life. They will work for you, these techniques, if you work for them. Beautiful. I love that. So let's talk about the Bible for a minute. Fillmore viewed the Bible as a symbolic and metaphysical guide to spiritual growth and enlightenment. He believed that the Bible should not be interpreted literally, but understood through metaphysical interpretation, where the stories and characters represent aspects of the human soul's journey and inner development. So what Unity believes is the story of the real Bible is this idea of the coming of mankind, and then the downfall, and then as we go through the Old Testament, all of the wars and everything else that was going on, and then finally Jesus comes around. He is the one that represents the new way, if you will, Christ consciousness, if you will, and then therefore the freedom or the spiritual awakening, if you will, that we too can go through. And so Unity and Fillmore did believe that, especially well, there's parts of the Bible that no questions asked that we believe are true. You know, we believe that there was at the beginning of the Bible what happened with the Jewish people and the struggles that they went through. And then, of course, we believe in the birth of Jesus Christ and everything that happened to him as well. So there's definitely some historical stuff in the Bible, but we also believe that there's a metaphysical interpretation of stuff. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. In his teaching, Fillmore often emphasized that the Bible contains deeper spiritual truths that, when decoded metaphysically, offer guidance for personal transformation and the awakening of the divine potential within. For example, he saw figures like Jesus Christ as symbols of divine nature within every person. And again, so we're going to look at this idea of decoding metaphysically, because that's a huge part of Unity, is metaphysical interpretation of the Bible. And we're actually going to go through an example of that. So Fillmore's approach encouraged individuals to apply biblical teachings practically in their lives to enhance spiritual growth and well-being. I love that. I love that. I love that. I love that. So, we also believe that the Bible's a metaphorical description of one's own spiritual journey of awakening, like I mentioned earlier. Every person, place, and thing in the Bible has a metaphysical interpretation. So I'm going to pause for a moment, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you to yeah, here's what I want to do. I want to be able to go to the Metaphysical Bible. So I just pulled this up, and you can go to it. This is free. This is at truthunity.net. And if you go to truthunity.net and you come up here and you type in the word, for example, Jesus, and what does Jesus means? So you're going to get a whole bunch of things you can choose from. Let's just make it easy and choose the first one, the metaphysical meaning of Jesus. So when you look at this, you can go through, and by the way, metaphysically in unity, any person, any place, anything, any number, they all have a metaphysical interpretation. And some people really dive into metaphysical interpretation. And let me just say that you will occasionally, if you're coming to our Unity Church, you'll see me dive into it now and then. Sometimes I really get into it, then I let go of it for a while, and then sometimes I come back, and next thing you know, I'm doing 3 or 4 talks about it using some type of metaphysical interpretation. I like it. I think it's a lot of fun to do it. Some people really get into it. I would say, kind of in the middle in terms of my use of it. But anyways, in here, if we look at the metaphysical definition of Jesus, it's, yes, we have the man, or the Nazareth, the son of Mary, the savior of mankind. Metaphysically, though, he is the I am, or the I am presence, or the Christ consciousness, as it's called. So metaphysically, that's what Jesus represents. And you could type in any person, again, any place in the Bible, and you could type in water, you could type in what a mountain means, you could type in anything. And you can actually go look up the definition. And it's really super fun to be able to start doing that and start doing some Bible metaphysical interpretations of the Bible. So I just wanted to give you a chance to see truthunity.net. It's a super fun thing to go to, especially if you are really inspired to really spend time and do some Bible study. And by the way, I meant to mention this earlier, I forgot. But when it comes to Unity, Unity definitely has a history of referencing the Bible. And so with me, I have a tendency to reference it occasionally, although not a ton. And it's really interesting because sometimes I'll have people come up to me and say, oh, Mike is doing he's diving way far into the Bible. And then other times I'll have people say, well, Mike's not doing the Bible enough. So just understand that for me, when it comes to the Bible, my feeling is that I'm going to use it, I'm going to reference it, especially around Christmas and around Easter. Because if things have to do with Jesus, then I'm probably going to be referencing a story in the Bible, and therefore I'm going to start using the Bible at that point in time. But I also reference several of the other holy books as well. So just so you know. All right, so that's the Metaphysical Bible, and what I thought I would do next is actually do a metaphysical interpretation, which I think would be super fun. All right, so what I want to do now is I want to do a metaphysical interpretation. This was something I had to do when I went through the ministerial program. I had to do a metaphysical interpretation of Revelation 6:8. And Revelation 6:8 says, I looked, and therefore before me was a pale horse. Its rider was named Death, and Hades was following close behind him. They were given power over a fourth of the earth to kill by sword, famine, and plague, and the wild beasts of the earth. I don't know about you, but when I first read this, I was like, oh my God, do I really have to do this? But I wanted to show you the way that you do the Metaphysical Bible interpretation, because there's a couple of steps to it. So I'm going to show you this. My hope is that you can read it. If you need to stop, then stop it, and you can go back and look at this thing. But I'm just going to explain it. If you'll look at this, there are 3 columns. There is a column that's all the way over to the left, and that's where you take the verse of the Bible and you break it down into nouns, pronouns, places, actions. So that's where you can see this is where the actual verse of the Bible is in the left-hand column. Then what you do is then you go into the Metaphysical Bible and you start looking up the definitions of all the different things. So there's John of Patmos. What did he realize? What does a pale horse realize? Power and freedom. What about Hades? Outer darkness and sense. What about to kill, taking a life? What about a sword, a weapon that man used against man? What about a famine? Right? And so you go through and you do a metaphysical interpretation. Then the third thing, and if you can believe it, it's literally called this. This is not a typo. But in this process, you're going to do and create what is called a clunky version. What is a clunky version? It's the first crack that you take at trying to make sense out of this metaphysical interpretation. So I'm just going to look at this and say, okay, look, so I got this, I, John, and then I looked it up metaphysically, what John represents, realizes a carnal thought produces nothing valuable. A thought or belief that our carnal thoughts produces nothing. So then I kind of did a clunky interpretation of that said I had an awareness that sense thoughts produce nothing valuable. Okay? So that was my clunky interpretation of that. And I would have to go back in and look at that if someone were to say, well, why did you think that? I don't know. I'd have to go back a few years. But my point is this, I just wanted to give you an example of this. And then what you start doing is you go through each one of these definitions, and then you start through prayer, through meditation, through really, really paying attention, you try to come up with a clunky definition or version of it. So you do that for every single thing on the left-hand side. And so you will see where I did that on the right-hand side in terms of my clunky version. So this is my clunky version on the left-hand side. And once you play with that for a while, once you stay with it for a while, then all of a sudden what you do is you kind of put it together and make it a final version. And so I'm going to show you that in a minute, but what I want to do is go back and read it to you again what the original said. So when you see the final, you're going to go, oh my God, that's amazing. So again, I looked, and therefore before me was a pale horse. Its rider was named Death, and Hades was followed closely behind him. They were given power over a fourth of the earth to kill by sword, famine, and plague, and the wild beasts of the earth. That is from the Bible. This is the metaphysical interpretation with the metaphysical definitions and the clunky version. But now let me read to you what my final was when I did the final version. That came across like this. And just listen. Maybe close your eyes as I read it. I've come to realize that when I focus solely on sense-based thoughts, those rooted in appearances, fears, and ego, I diminish my inner power and freedom. This disconnection weakens my spiritual vitality, leading to inertia and a feeling of separation from my divine nature. Left unchecked, such thoughts begin to dominate my mind, sapping my life energy and clouding my faith. I may even project this disconnection onto others, diminishing their light as well. To stay aligned with spirit, I must consciously choose higher, life-affirming thoughts that keep me rooted in the divine truth, connected to my spiritual consciousness, and anchored in love, faith, and freedom. So as you can see, there's a tremendous difference between the original biblical quote in Revelations versus a metaphysical interpretation. And that's why metaphysical interpretation can be so fun. And you can do this with every single person, place, thing, story in the Bible. It's amazing. You can do this. And in truthunity.net, you can actually go type in entire sections where they've done a metaphysical interpretation throughout the course of the years and look at all the different way they defined it and what they came up with. It's really fascinating. And by the way, there are differences sometimes with the way that I might interpret it versus somebody else's way of interpreting it, right? It's kind of a gut thing when you start doing metaphysical interpretation. So I just wanted to go through, we've already kind of went through this a little bit, but obviously unity has a difference on some major things as opposed to traditional beliefs. And I want to go over a few of those. So unity believes that Jesus was three. We have three definitions. First of all, Jesus, which is the human being, the man from Nazareth who walked the earth, laughed, cried, and lived just the way that you live. So that was Jesus. And then we have, and Jesus, the man, became our way shower. And metaphysically, Jesus represents the potential in us to fully realize our Christ potential. So that was Jesus, period, right? And all these definitions. But then when you come down to Jesus Christ is the names that identifies the individual who perfectly understood his divine nature, who fully demonstrated his divine potential, and who completely fulfilled his divine purpose on this earth. And that's why he was called Jesus Christ. Unity believes that we all have Christ consciousness within us, each and every one of us. And therefore, we believe every human has the potential to have Christ consciousness. And we believe, just like Jesus, if we perfectly understood our divine nature, we would be able to demonstrate our divine potential as well. So we don't think it was, as we say at Unity, we believe that Jesus was the example, not the exception, where traditional Christianity believes that Jesus was the exception. That's the difference. And for us, especially us metaphysicians, that's a huge difference. Huge difference. The one who revealed Christ through human form and human existence. That's which reminds us that this potential dwells within us. Yes, all the above, right? How about heaven and hell? Does Unity believe in heaven and hell? Well, we do not believe they are geographical places. We believe that heaven and hell are states of consciousness. And we believe that what it comes down to is this idea or thought: are we living in the awareness of our oneness with God? And again, I'm going to go back to the statement about states of consciousness and having the realization that there's been people that I've met in my life, and I thought to myself, they could not be living in anything worse than I can imagine in terms of a place, in terms of where they were at mentally. Because it was just, they were miserable people. And so that really resonated with me when I heard that. So again, I'm just going to go back to the states of consciousness. Are we living in the awareness of our oneness with God? We would consider that heaven. Or are we living in a sense of separation from God? We would consider that hell. But we do not believe, again, just to emphasize this, that they are not geographical places. They're both states of consciousness. So let's talk about the devil. We do not believe that there is a personal devil. There's only one power and one presence. The devil is a state of consciousness that is adverse to divine good. Other names for the state of consciousness are the adversary, the carnal mind, the accuser, and the old man. There is no personal devil. God is the one omnipresent principle of the universe, and there is no room for any principle of evil personified or otherwise. So Unity does not believe in the devil. How about sin and salvation? Well, sin, this is any thought, belief, or action that leads us to think that we are separate from God. We also know that the definition of sin was an old Greek definition saying missing the mark. It was an archery term. So we don't believe, like fundamental Christianity believes, in terms of what a sin means, which means you've done a bad thing and now you either have to go be forgiven for it or you're going to spend the rest of eternity in hell. So we don't believe that. We believe, and when we say falling short of divine perfection, all we mean is our thoughts are off in terms of falling short of divine perfection. Salvation is a process that takes place in our own consciousness, not through a person named Jesus Christ. So in other words, we believe that as we start to do what's called our inner work, and we start looking at our belief systems, just like Myrtle did, and as we start to clean up and remove the thoughts that say we're less than or we are separate than God, we are separate from God, that we are born in original sin, and all these other thoughts that are put on, that were put on many of us, not all. There are some people that kind of got away without being tooth scathed, but I certainly was in the other camp, that's for sure. This changes consciousness is moving from a sense of literalism and selfishness into spiritual understanding. Love it. Salvation results in our being free from ignorance, lack, and limitation, and in being free for wholeness, abundance, peace, and fulfillment. It's the ongoing identification with the presence of the Christ in us. Yeah. So that was sin, that was salvation, and that was heaven, hell, and Jesus. The purpose of prayer, another big part of unity. Prayer is not a matter of conquering God's reluctance, but of attuning ourselves to God's eternal willingness. The purpose of prayer, then, is to affirm in our consciousness with that which is true of God and our relationship with Him. But the Mother Father knows even before you ask, and it is the Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Thus, don't waste your time asking for help. It is already yours. This is a huge difference between how unity prays versus traditional Christianity. We don't believe that you ask for help. You can, but there's a big difference in the way that you do it. We come at it from the standpoint of, listen, this is already yours, claim it. Call it forth into expression. Stand into your power and be clear with it and claim it. So this is the example where, and I'm going to talk about this in a minute, this is called affirmative prayer. When most people think of prayer, they think of asking God for something. Not so in unity. Unity uses affirmative prayer. Rather than begging or beseeching God, this method involves connecting with the Spirit of God within and asserting positive beliefs about His desired outcome. Affirmative prayer is the same method of prayer Jesus taught when He said, "So I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it." Again, so I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. And so, therefore, what we do is we don't believe in beseeching and begging God. Please, 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 please. Nope, we affirm what we believe that we have received it, and we keep affirming it that it is so. There is a 5-step prayer method in unity, and I'm just going to cover the basics here. We're not going to go super deep into this, but it starts off with relaxation. You just get chill, you just relax. Then you concentrate. Then you meditate. Then you go through the process of the realization, where you basically, in the meditation process, you sit in the space of meditating on whatever it is that you're trying to create until what happens is something clicks, as the Fillmores used to say. And as having that experience, I can tell you that when you sit there in meditation, you will feel something click, and that's called the realization. And then ultimately we finish it up by Thanksgiving. So we're not going to go into any kind of depth right here. It's more of just exposing you to the 5-step prayer method that Unity uses, just so you have an understanding that we do have a specific prayer method. At the corner, one of the cornerstones with the process I'm going to talk about for a minute is changing your belief systems. And I'm going to go back and use Myrtle's example because it's a perfect example of denials and affirmations and why and how they can be so powerful. So a denial is to declare that a belief is untrue, even in the face of contrary evidence. We do not deny the symptoms or the facts, but we do deny its power over us. An affirmation is basically to assert positively that something is so, even in the face of contrary evidence, a statement of truth. So the best example we have of that is when Myrtle was going through her process. Again, she starts it off and she says, what? I am a child of God. That's called an affirmation. And therefore, I do not inherit sickness. That's called the denial. So often when you start using affirmations and denials or denials and affirmations, you'll use two of those at the same exact time. And so therefore, in this case, Myrtle says, I'm a child of God, and therefore I do not inherit sickness. Okay? All right. I didn't realize my computer was unplugged. All right. There we go. Again, in some of this stuff, I have to be honest with you, I'm going through really quick, but it's okay. It's not important that you memorize all this stuff right now, but one of the things I wanted to talk about, because this is a big deal in unity, is something that's called the 12 powers. What are the 12 powers? The 12 powers are powers that Fillmore's believed that we had the ability to call forth and have them and use them to create certain things in our life. And so the 12 powers is basically the ability to do something. And not only that, the powers are also associated with a disciple, and they're also associated with those of you who know. It's also associated with your chakras. And so I didn't put the chakras in here because it just confuses things. But the truth is, if you look up a unity book about the 12 powers, you'll see that all of them are associated with one of the main chakras, the main 7, and they've got a few other ones in there as well. Again, I didn't want to confuse it. And if you've got any questions, come see me. But you can see, for example, the power of faith is the ability to believe, and the disciple you would use is Peter. If you wanted to call forth strength, you're calling to be able to persevere, to be strong, to endure. It's the disciple Andrew, so on and so forth. But you can see there's a list of the 12 powers, and there is the rest of the list of the 12 different powers and how you could go about using them. You would use them in your affirmations. Okay? I just wanted to mention as well, for anybody that's interested, if you're really wanting to do a deep dive into the 12 powers, there's a book that's called Power Up. Believe it or not, I know this is going to sound funny. I would not suggest reading the Fillmore book on the 12 powers. I would suggest you reading the book Power Up by Paul Hesselbeck, because it's a more modern version, and I think it's easier to understand than the 12 powers book was by Fillmore. Just my opinion. Unity has, believe it or not, something that's referred to as the 5 principles. Occasionally you might hear me quote one, but rarely will you hear me talk about them all at one time, and I just don't spend a lot of time on them. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with them, but I think sometimes they can confuse people. So just understand, there are these things. When I went through the ministerial program, I had to know what the 5 basic principles are. I do know what the 5 basic principles are. And occasionally you will hear me mention them, but you should know, if you're learning the basics, what are the 5 basic principles? First one, God is the source creator of all. There is no other enduring power. I often say that there is only one presence and only one power in my life, and that is God the good. So that's the affirmation that goes along with it. Some people have heard that one. We are spiritual beings created in God's image. There is a seed of God that lives within each person. I love that. The third one, we create our life experience through our way of thinking. So everything that happens in our life, we create that through the way of our thinking. There's a power in affirmative prayer, which we believe increases our awareness of God. And finally, the knowledge of these spiritual principles is not enough. We must live them. Those are the 5 basic principles for unity, and you will see them, well, in our lobby, there is a board with the 5 principles on them. Again, you'll hear me talk about them occasionally, but it's not like I'm always talking about the 5 unity principles, and there's reasons for that. And if you ever want to know why, come and see me. All right. So that's going to bring us to the point of our homework. I'm going to have you do a couple things that you did last time. First of all, call Silent Unity again. Again, this should be on speed dial by now. Go visit our website, unityspiritualcommunity.org. It'd be fun to go in there and play with that, or you can go see our Facebook page and other social media. For those of you that want to go deeper, again, I've listed a few books. Some of these were from last week. Some of them I'm going to add to this list. Discover the Power Within You, Unity: A Quest for Truth, both by Butterworth. How to Speak Unity is a really good book by Temple Hayes. In case you're wondering, or in case someone goes, what are you doing? Like, what's up? What is Unity? That's a really good book to get. We've got some in the lobby. Of course, The Tradition, Lessons in Truth by Emily Cady. And then for those of you who want to do a deeper dive, here are some of the other books. If you've got any questions on these books, come see me before you go buy them, and I can guide you and direct you in terms of different things depending on how deep you want to go. For example, if you have fallen in love with metaphysics and that could be your calling and you want to do a deeper dive into it, Heart-Centered Metaphysics is your book. It's an incredible book. They used to hand them out to the ministers only. When I went through the ministerial program and I got my hands on it, I was mad that I didn't have it prior to then. I felt like it was held from me and I wasn't happy about it. And so anyways, that's for people that are really wanting to do a deep dive into the metaphysics. Okay. All right. Well, as we wrap things up, next week, we're going to talk about Unity Spiritual Community. We're going to talk about the membership covenant, the membership Sunday, and the little ceremony we're going to have. I hope this has been enjoyable. I hope you learned a thing or two. I've really enjoyed sharing it with you. Again, if you've got any questions, if there's anything else that I can do for you, please don't hesitate to let me know. If not, we will see you next time on Class 3 regarding our Unity Spiritual Community. Okay? Take care. God bless.